Ever play a sequel or spin-off that departed from the previous entries in a series in a good way? One that seemed to recognize the potential in certain aspects of the game that came before it, but took those in their own direction to make something just as great or even better? That's what Prey 2 would have been had it ever been released, but due to a myriad of strange publisher-related problems, what could have been an exciting new direction for a promising young franchise ended in nothing but a faint whimper, leaving interested fans confused and disappointed. The original Prey was a sci-fi first-person shooter developed by Human Head Studios in 2006 for the PC and 360. It starred a man named Tommy who's abducted by aliens attempting to harvest the human race for food. He's taken to a horrific giant organic ship called the Sphere that consumes planets to sustain itself. There, he attempts to save his loved ones and escape with the help of alien gadgets and supernatural powers bestowed upon him by his Native American heritage. It's actually a pretty interesting game that blends together the conventions of a lot of good first-person shooters with some of its own original ideas. At the end of the game, Tommy is given the opportunity to explore the rest of the galaxy, which you as the player of course take. The last thing you see is the teaser line, "Prey will continue," which leaves you on a nice cliffhanger with the implication of something greater to look forward to in the vastness of space, but it unfortunately never came. Development on Prey 2 started soon after and was officially announced in 2011, with the game making a big appearance at that year's E3 with another great trailer by our good old friends at Blur Studio.
You tied my lead and pulled my chain to watch my blood begin to boil. But I'm gonna break. I'm gonna break my rusty cage and run.
Kill you! Finally tracked me down, huh? Somebody shoot this motherfucker!
And run.
Get out of my way!
This trailer got a lot of attention based on its premise and setting, but what's really great is they didn't just show a CGI trailer to give an idea of what the game might look like one day. At the same E3, Human Head was already showing off gameplay demonstrations that featured everything in the CGI trailer and more. Blur does a good job accurately representing the mechanics of a title when they make a trailer for it, and this was one where we really got to see those similarities with a demo that was built on pretty much the exact same premise, only playable. The game was going to be a huge departure from the first one, but in a way that looked really promising. Instead of following Tommy, Prey 2 is going to follow a new character named Killian Samuels, who was an air marshal on the airplane you see crash into the Sphere after being abducted during the events of the first game. After being abducted, what happens to Killian is a mystery even to himself, as he's lost his memory of those events. What he does know is that he's found himself on a seedy alien planet known as Exodus and needs to survive. There, he started a new life for himself as an expert bounty hunter using the skills he developed from his job back on Earth. In the first game, you were the prey, but in Prey 2, you'd be exploring the other side of that hunter-prey dichotomy, embodying the hunter role and chasing down your own prey. Killian could apprehend or kill any crooked alien he was paid to, no matter how untouchable they believe themselves to be, using his nimble agility paired with a robust arsenal of sci-fi gizmos. He had boots that allowed him to hover and glide through the city, electric bolas that he could throw to tie up perpetrators on the run, and he even had shoulder-mounted missile launchers that could take out other assailants without distracting him from his main target. These were just a few of the tools that would be at Killian's disposal over the course of the game, with things like an electric whip and a stealth camo module being rumored through a leaked list of achievements found through Steam. All of these abilities were designed to integrate and take advantage of Killian's unique parkour mechanics, which would have allowed him to jump, climb, and slide all over Exodus, all the while utilizing his weapons to more easily facilitate the apprehension of his targets, even when they're using tricks like teleporting to try and escape from you. Imagine something like Infamous in first person, where you can climb and hang all over the place, but also shoot from any vantage point. These kinds of movement mechanics really give the game its own distinct playstyle and set it apart from other first-person shooters out at the same time. If the game played just like the original Prey, it wouldn't have survived in the climate of the 7th console generation, where the first-person shooter genre had become extremely saturated. In the same vein, Prey 2 set itself apart from its predecessor by taking a sandbox approach instead of fitting into a strict level-based progression like in the first. The player would freely explore Exodus until they decided to take on bounties and missions or pursue random events and crimes they'd see transpire. The game was split into 3 distinct hubs that the player could travel between. Due to Exodus's orbit, one area would always be facing away from the sun and exist in a perpetual cold and dark state, while another of these areas would always be facing towards the sun, remaining in a hot and sunny state. The area we got to see the most of existed in the middle of these 2 extremes and was called the Bowery, a crime-ridden sci-fi city filled with tons of different alien races looking to cause trouble. The only kind of law enforcement shown came in the form of these floating surveillance drones that didn't even seem to care when Killian shoved an innocent alien over a ledge to his death. The morals of this planet were definitely going to be different from what we're used to in open world games, and that would have been an interesting aspect of how we'd interact with this world, knowing we'd be able to get away with a lot more immoral actions without seeming out of the norm. The level of authority present seemed to change depending on which area you were in, as the hot and sunny area of the planet seemed to be a lot more authoritarian. In the lower left, there was a message warning you that the regime had its eyes on you, which would most likely call for more subdued actions on the part of the player. Maybe Killian was a wanted man by the government of that part of the planet, and you'd have to sneak around to avoid alerting enemies and becoming the prey yourself. If you continued to cause havoc or shot one of the surveillance drones, you'd be cracked down on, and it would also feed into the morality system the developers mentioned being in the game. Yes, this was a mid-7th gen game, so it had to have a morality system in it, but unlike most, it didn't seem like it would be browbeating you to either be a knight in shining armor or someone who burns down orphanages. It seemed like it would just affect your reputation and how the random aliens around the planet regarded you, which fit into that Wild West sense of style. I can just imagine walking into a bar and hearing all of the patrons whispering among themselves about whether you were a bastard or helping hand. Unlike most first-person shooters, Killian would holster his weapon by default, and it was up to the player to decide when to bring it out, triggering different reactions from characters realistically. There were all kinds of choices like this in the game. When taking a job, you could decide whether you wanted to take someone in, dead or alive, and your reward would reflect that. Once you captured someone, you could interrogate them by force to get some extra information at the risk of killing them. You could even take bribes from your target, shifting your focus towards killing the person who originally gave you the mission in the first place. How you went about capturing targets was up to you as well. You could go in guns blazing or take a more stealthy route. In one of the demos, they showed off an ability to take people hostage, and the player could use them as a human shield to get closer to their target. There were gonna be a lot of connections to the first Prey as well. Tommy from the first game was mentioned many times in interviews and was said to return as the only human on Exodus and play a big role in the game's story. The game would actually begin on the sphere at the very same crash site you ran through in the first game. The player would begin the game emerging from the wreckage and attempt to fight off the hunters that inhabit the sphere before being incapacitated and waking up on Exodus. Who knows where the story would have gone from there, but from what was shown, it had the potential to be very interesting and expand on the characters and universe that the first game set up. Why would Tommy be on this planet, and how would that tie into the ending of the first game? Why can't Killian remember what happened after the sphere, and what kinds of secrets could be hiding in the recesses of his mind? The game might not have been just like the first one, but it had enough connections to the first game to justify being a sequel, and it retained the rocking tone and sense of style that the series was trying to establish. The first game began with an alien abduction set to Blue Oyster Cult's Don't Fear the Reaper, and Prey 2 continued that with its announcement trailer set to Johnny Cash's cover of Soundgarden's Rusty Cage. People have always been dying for an alien bounty hunter game, but every time they seem to get cancelled. It's a concept that really resonates with people because of how cool it seems, and Human Head seemed to be going as far as they could with it. They were extremely passionate about the project, but unfortunately, things quickly began to go awry and the game never saw a release. Now, explaining what went wrong with the development process of Prey 2 is going to involve a lot of he said, she said. We're going to be dealing with statements from both sides that may not line up. According to an IGN interview from 2013, after the game was shown at E3, Bethesda was so pleased with what the team had created that they gave the studio a development extension of 6 months to a year. The game was set to come out in 2012 after it was polished up, but Bethesda decided they wanted to own the studio, probably seeing it as a promising potential asset that they could get even more good games out of in the future. Human Head wasn't interested in being permanently tied to a publisher and declined the offer, but Bethesda wasn't going to accept that. They began using milestone manipulation to weaken the studio into a state that they could easily scoop up. Instead of giving them the time they needed to finish the game, they instead began implementing harsher deadlines on them, and when they couldn't make them, they would withhold payments in order to eventually bleed them dry. Without money, they couldn't stay afloat and finish the game, and would have no other choice but to accept Bethesda's buyout. Bethesda claimed Human Head wasn't progressing fast enough for them, so they denied further funding, while Human Head claimed Bethesda was making unreasonable deadlines for them that they couldn't make. Bethesda claimed the game needed a lot of work, was lackluster, and didn't live up to their quality standards, which was their justification for refusing to pay out. Setting Bethesda's quality standards to one side, that justification just doesn't gel with them trying to purchase the studio at the same time. If you saw them as a bunch of screw-ups, there would be no reason to buy them, and that also doesn't gel with Bethesda originally giving them an extension due to how impressed they were with the game. According to a member of Human Head, they were trying to buy them at a sweet price by making them desperate. This would mean Bethesda was only pretending to be unimpressed with their work and intentionally making unachievable deadlines to put forth the outward appearance that Human Head were a bunch of deadbeats that didn't deserve their funding but should be happy and accept their offer to be purchased. According to this same interview, Human Head basically went on strike in November of 2011 and development stopped. They tried to negotiate with each other, but nothing moved forward in 2012 and their contract eventually ended. Bethesda got its game back and Human Head was left with nothing to show for it. Human Head has since been trying to build themselves back up, only working on smaller titles and in support roles for other games, but it's at least good to see they didn't get crushed by this whole endeavor. After Bethesda was finished with Human Head, they tried to get Obsidian Entertainment to finish the game, but because they didn't have the rights to Human Head's internal tech or any of the project's source code, there was no way Obsidian was going to be able to pull it off. 2013 was when rumors began to surface that they moved development to Arcane Studios, the people behind Dishonored, and as we learned at E3 2016, that was eventually proven true.
Good morning, Morgan. Today is Monday, March 15th, 2032.
Have a nice
You're not going to like what I have to say next.
I've wanted to make a video on the topic of Prey 2 for a really long time, and while the game was officially cancelled in late 2014, the sudden emergence of this reboot by Arcane was the jolt I needed to finally make this thing. Set in the year 2032 aboard a spaceship named Talos 1, designed to look like it was made in the 1960s, the player must survive an invasion of black goo monsters using an assortment of weird gadgets. It's a psychological first-person shooter with RPG elements and crafting that aims to be a successor to System Shock 2, not Prey. This has been openly stated with no attempt to hide it. In an interview released in August 2016, Arcane states that they had already wanted to make a sci-fi first-person shooter set on a space station with aliens when Bethesda came to them with the name Prey. So instead of taking the risk of starting a new IP for their game idea, everyone agreed it would be a much safer idea just to slap the name Prey onto it and call it a day. I mean, the game is still about being the prey of enemies that want to get you, which is something you could attribute to most games in existence, so the name totally fits in the loosest way possible. But hey, it has the wrench, so it's totally like the original Prey. No wait, System Shock and Bioshock both had wrenches too. They've stated that the game has no connection to the original Prey universe in any way, and that they were actually instructed by Bethesda not to try to shoehorn any relations to the original series. They even explicitly stated it won't have vagina doors. I mean, come on guys, could you at least throw us a bone? Arcane's Prey is just not Prey, simple as that. This is just a completely unrelated game with completely different ambitions, wearing the name tag of an old series whose fans were dying for an impressive looking sequel. And that isn't to say it'll be bad by any means, and I wish Arcane all the luck in the world in creating a game that I'll happily play through if it ends up being great. I want them to make their own game the way they want to, but still the use of the name Prey is just an uncool and forced move that only serves to insult and inspire ill will in those who are excited to see the original Prey series continue. Really, what kind of benefit are they getting from calling the game Prey when it has no relation? Are there really that many people who will buy the game just because it has Prey written on the box? Probably not, and the game probably could have stood on its own as a System Shock-inspired first-person shooter by the people behind Dishonored. If Prey 2 came out and was a success, then I could see its name becoming something highly marketable, but as of right now, this is a completely unrelated retooling of a game from a decade ago that not many people even know about. The game even lets you choose your gender, so the person you play as doesn't really have a set character and will probably be more of a self-insert for the player. This is a major difference from the original Prey's take on its main character. Tommy was a no-nonsense protagonist that would get angry and curse his enemies for putting him through hell, and this seemed to carry over to Killian, who would kick open doors and chase wrongdoers down to get the price on their heads. It just sucks that after Wolfenstein and Doom came back with impressive new entries, that Prey would be taking in this direction instead of coming back with an even crazier sequel that capitalized on all of its qualities. Like I said, I'm totally fine with Arcane pursuing whatever game they want, and I won't let this affect my judgment of the quality of this Prey when it comes out, but I wish it wasn't at the cost of the Prey IP. I would have much rather seen another developer tackle their own Prey 2 than the whole concept behind the Prey universe being scrapped in favor of a System Shock Bioshock hybrid that could have been named something else. What happened to Prey 2 and the Prey franchise as a whole is a real shame, especially when Human Head was so dedicated to continuing the series and making something truly great. It's totally heartbreaking to see what remains of the game on their website because you can tell just by the blurbs about the game that they're still upset they didn't get to release it. According to people involved in the project, the game was nearly complete by the time Bethesda ditched it, so I wish they could have stuck with it a bit longer just so we could have played it. Bethesda is still sticking to their story that Prey 2 just wasn't up to their quality standards and that was the only reason they had for scrapping it, which might honestly be true. I'm not trying to go for this big bad corporate narrative so we can have a villain to blame, but reading the many interviews and posts by people involved with Prey 2's development really does enforce this. Prey 2 could have been a fun experimental shooter based around a concept that many people want to experience, and it might not have been the last game like it if it sold well. It could have gone somewhere great, but unfortunately it'll probably be a very long time before someone tries to make a game like it again. Arkane's Prey will probably have its own merits, but I'm still sad we couldn't live in a world where we got both of these titles. Prey 2 may never come out, but you could at least give the original Prey a shot to compensate. Other than that, we can only try to forget about the potential of Prey 2 and hope that something can fill its place in time. I hope both Human Head and Arkane see success in the future, and if what's been said here about Bethesda is true, then I hope they never try something like that again because it was a completely unethical move that resulted in nothing but misfortune for everyone involved. Thank you all for watching and see you all next time. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting this channel on Patreon. With your help, I can continue to dedicate time towards making videos like this as frequently as I have been. It also helps me purchase games and equipment for these videos. Just recently I was able to buy this new mic, so I hope you were able to tell a quality difference, and I also ordered a 3DS recorder for some 3DS related videos I have planned. Thank you all again, and I hope you stick around.